Hello, welcome to another episode of Analog Adventures. My name is Crispin Jeffrey Franco. I'm a co-founder of Stacks Book Club, and joining me tonight is debut novelist Daria Lavelle. Daria is an American fiction writer born in Kiev, Ukraine, and raised in New York. Uh, Her work explores themes of identity and belonging through magic and the uncanny. Her short stories have appeared in The Deadlands, Dread Machine, and elsewhere. She holds degrees in writing from Princeton University and Sarah Lawrence College. She lives in New Jersey with her husband, children, and Golden Doodle, all of whom love a great meal almost as much as she does. Daria, welcome to Analog Adventures. What are you drinking tonight?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm drinking water,
That's
which is
wonderful.
very boring, but last night was actually the pub day for Aftertaste, and I was drinking something much more interesting. So I'll tell you about that. I was having an aviation, which is a really cool cocktail from this particular place in Hoboken, New Jersey called Stingray Lounge, which is one of my favorite cocktail bars. And it's actually a drink that inspired a drink from the book. So
Nice. Well,
that I was having that.
that's awesome. That I mean, yeah, you're as we're recording today, your book is 1 day old.
hmm
What does that feel like?
It feels really amazing. It feels incredible to have put it into the world, and now it's taking on a life of its own. It's really exciting to watch readers get to experience it for the first time, and to see people get so excited about these characters and this story that have lived with me for a very long time.
That's awesome. So where does the story come from? When did you know you wanted to be a writer? Did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, I've known I wanted to be a writer since I was 15. And I say that like without any sort of irony. Like I was 15 and I was like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I would come home from school in high school and I would sit at my desk for hours. And my older brother was kind of like a computer genius and had made me this really old PC computer hacked together out of different parts. And I would sit there clacking away on this keyboard for hours and just practicing and writing short stories. And I wrote my very first novel when I was 15. And of course, it didn't see the light of day. I tried, but it didn't. But I've known that writing is sort of in my soul. It's the way that I see the world. I see the world in sentences and images, and I put them together in my head constantly. So it's always been the driving force of I think who I am. I'm happiest when I'm writing. So to me, it's a very natural thing. Um, and the path to this book is interesting. So in 2013, I was working in advertising and I was like the typical cliche. I would leave the office at 7 or 8 p.m. and then I would go to a cafe in New York City and I would write until they kicked me out. And so I was having one of these writing sessions and I had this just like image come into my head. That's how a lot of my ideas start, with just like this really visceral image. And it was this guy in this really crappy Hell's Kitchen apartment. And there's like, the brick is exposed, but it's crumbling. And there's the floor is pockmarked and the kitchen's awful. And he is really meticulously plating this dish of food and he puts it on the table in front of him. And this beautiful glittering ghost comes through the brick and is compelled by this food and wants to eat it. And that was it. That was the whole scene, full stop. And I just felt something go through me. I was like, this is a big idea. This is something really interesting and compelling, and there's something here. But I had none of the answers to all of these questions, like who is this guy? Who is the ghost? What's the deal with the food? Can this always happen this way? And it took me a long time to unpack all of the answers. And I kind of had these breadcrumbs in my life along the way that opened the story up way beyond this apartment and this one scene between these two characters.
That's amazing. And it's fitting, I guess, that you have like this vision of a character because the way that the book is structured and the experiences of the character, that feels like very fitting. So let's set the table for folks. Can you give us the full log line for Aftertaste? What is Aftertaste about? What are readers out there
Yeah.
going to pick up and discover?
So Aftertaste is a ghost story. It's a love story and it's a food story. It's about a man named Constantine who loses his father when he's really young. And in his grief, he begins to develop this ability to taste the food of spirits. So he'll experience this flavor he's never eaten, and he knows that a spirit is present, and he doesn't know what to do with this ability. It really kind of freaks him out. And he keeps it a secret for most of his life until he's in his 30s, and he accidentally discovers that by cooking the food that he's been tasting, he can actually bring a spirit back for one last meal with someone they love. And that sets him on a journey to open a New York City restaurant serving closure. And along the way, he falls in love and he creates all of these unintended bad consequences in the afterlife. And he learns a lot along the way about what it's like to cook in New York City kitchens and what that takes, and also what it's like to let go of somebody that you've lost. So I would say that it's a story with a little something for everybody. If you like speculative fiction, it's definitely for you. If you love food stories, it's definitely for you. If you're into like big epic love stories, it's also for you. But um, I think like a good meal, it's balanced in many ways.
Yeah, it feels yeah, I agree with you. There's like the right amount of ghost story in there, the right amount of love stories in there. It feels like it has to be personal to you. How personal is the story? I mean, there's some biographical details
Mm.
between Kostya, the main character, and yourself that I noticed in prepping for tonight. And then just the way that you describe the New York culinary scene. I mean, obviously you've lived in New York, it sounds like, for a while and have some experience as a diner. But what's your connection to the kitchen look like?
Yeah, so I think it's a really personal book for me in a lot of levels. Like Kostya's whole background is very much based on my background. So my family is Ukrainian. I was born in Ukraine. We moved to the United States when I was 2, and I grew up kind of with a foot in two different worlds. So I was always trying to be American enough to fit in with all of the kids in my school and all the people I was around. At the same time, we tried really hard. My parents were incredible at making sure that we held on to our Ukrainian heritage and our culture. So we were constantly, speaking a different language and eating different foods and making sure that we kept that part of our lives alive. And that was really reflected in my experience and how I wrote Constantine. I gave him a lot of the things that I experienced, like being the stinky lunchbox kid and feeling
Yeah.
like, you didn't belong enough, you didn't know the right thing to say, you didn't feel like you were part of anything. And I think that's also reflected in kind of the speculative nature of his experience. So when he's a kid, he's Ukrainian, he's American, he doesn't know what he is really. And then as he gets older, he also doesn't belong because he's tasting the food of ghosts. So he's straddling the living world and the world of the dead. And then in terms of kind of the New York City experience, I have been lucky enough to always have New York City as my city that I grew up in and around. And I had my 20s there and I was able to eat in all sorts of incredible restaurants. Food has always been not only this tether to Ukraine and to my ancestry and to my culture, but it's also been my way of exploring the world. It's something that I love to experience as a way to experience different cultures. Whenever I go to a new place, one of the first things I try to do is to take a food tour and experience, New Orleans through the eyes of its food, or, Miami through the eyes of its food. Um, and I think that food is so connective and so interesting. It's always been an obsession for me. I grew up watching so many cooking shows and reading so many cookbooks and experimenting in the kitchen and trying to understand flavors from different cuisines and different cultures. And my older cousin is actually a New York City chef, so I've gotten a little bit of the inside scoop, getting to go into some kitchens and seeing how things run through that side too.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it definitely feels like the character is rooted in something personal for you. The kitchen scenes feel like feel like you could be writing for The Bear, or we
Mm.
could be watching like Top Chef. Like I picture Michael Voltaggio as Cassie at times. I'm like the type of reader that when I read a character, like I instantly see like a real person
Oh, give me your cast list.
in well, that's the thing. I feel like I was incepted by the bear because I can't not see Jeremy Allen White as Kostya. Just I feel like they have like the same sort of vibe to them.
There's a
Like the
quiet intensity.
masculinity, like the yeah, the sort of like off center, but like still like very handsome and like has like a magnetism to him that maybe he doesn't quite realize. Like there's
Mm.
some real, which is like a fun juxtaposition to one of the other characters in the book. Frankie, who's Kasha's best friend in the book, is very much more of like the what I would picture like the life of the party. And it's like
Hmm.
watching that sort of dynamic and the two of them progress through the book and how the relationship evolves throughout the course of the book was super fun. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
I've been like telling people it's like the bear meets, and I've been struggling like what's the right ghost movie because it's
Mm.
not a ghost story in the sense of like a haunting ghost story. It's
Right.
almost a ghost story in the sense of like love. And I
Mm.
think I've settled on this movie that starred Robert Downey Jr. Came out in like the mid '90s called Heart and Souls. And I don't know why, but I watched that movie way too many times when I was a kid, probably like not anywhere near old enough to be watching it. Um, but that's so if you ever are looking for something to do on a boring night, check out Heart and Souls and see if that lines up.
I feel like I've seen that way back when. I'm picturing Robert Downey Jr. now in this movie, and if it's what I'm thinking of, I feel like that checks out.
Yeah.
I feel like it's sort of like the Bear meets Pushing Daisies, the Bear meets Hades Town kind of
Yeah.
vibes too.
Yep.
Because it's got this like, you're right, it's a ghost story, but it's very intentionally not scary, spooky ghost necessarily. It's sort of like longing, lingering ghost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not ghosts, yeah, in the sense of like, ooh, scary, spooky, jump scare.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
ghost in the sense of like attachment and longing and that, you know,
Mm.
that desire to see your person one more time, whoever that person may be. So I'm such a huge fan. Uh yeah, I'm such a huge fan. Um what was it like getting this book published? Was it easy? Like you set this book out, you started querying, did it get picked up pretty quick or
Um, it was an amazing whirlwind process. So it took me, like I started to explain, it took me like years and years and years to write. I had that idea in 2013. I didn't start writing it really in earnest till 2019, and then
wow.
I kind of finished it in 2022. And at that point, I was in a master's program for creative writing in speculative fiction at Sarah Lawrence, and they had this sort of meet and greet with agents for second year students. So they prefaced it as like, this is not how you find an agent. This is to practice querying. So I was like, okay, I'm going to practice querying, and I'm going to write a query letter for this book that I am working on and almost done with. And the agent that I kind of matched with to practice with loved the whole concept and loved the first 10 pages and was like, can you send this to me when you're done? And this was in May, and the very first season of The Bear premiered, I think that June or July. And by September 1st, I had an email from her in my inbox being like, I've just watched The Bear and I can't stop thinking about your book.
Yeah.
Are you done yet? So we chatted, and she's been incredible. Lucy Carson, shout out to her. She's amazing. And we basically worked on it together through the next summer. And then right after Labor Day in 2023, we went on sub with it, and it was like the experience of all of my dreams and hopes. I had queried things before. I'd written some YA novels that just died on submission, and so I was expecting very much this process to be like, sorry but no, sorry but no. Um, but instead, this time we went out to some international publishers first, and I had a couple of international deals before the US editors had even had a chance to
Wow.
read, which was incredible. And then we had a lot of interest, and the book went to auction. And I would say within like a week and a half to 2 weeks from when we went on submission, we found, the team of my dreams. So
That's
it was
amazing.
amazing.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, the story resonates so easily. It's hard to find a reader not being able to connect with the idea of like what would the one meal be that brings back a loved one for one more night? Like
Hmm.
everyone can or at least can come up with an idea of what that meal would look like
Right.
paired with the realism of the writing paired with the love story, like the balancing of all those things are so good. Was it always going to be this balance, or was it at any point was it more of a ghost story? Was it more of a love story? Was it always this?
I went into this, so I will preface by saying that I'm a huge weenie and I cannot watch horror movies.
Same. I live my life trying to avoid anxiety at all costs.
Right,
Like
same.
subjecting myself to it for fun is not my idea.
I have a very, very active imagination. And so all of those, like the jump scares, all of that, I will take with me into life. So I set out to write this knowing that it was going to be about ghosts and about death, but I wanted to make it sort of subverting expectations of what that means. I wanted to make it a ghost story that wasn't scary. I wanted to make it a love story that wasn't necessarily expected, and the beats that story hits aren't necessarily your typical romance. I wanted to write a food story where the ending wasn't just and they worked really hard and they finally opened the restaurant at the end.
Yeah.
So I wanted to think about all of those kinds of ideas and remix them a little bit and see what happens when you mash them up. And I very intentionally went into this knowing there are going to be some heavier and more poignant moments. I want people to read this and experience a whole journey and a whole gamut of emotions, but I never wanted it to sit in any one of those emotions for too long. So I didn't want it to feel like a book only about grief or a book only about love or a book only about joy. Um, and so I tried really hard to balance every single time that there's a scene that deals with death, it's sandwiched by scenes that are really bright or about life or at a party or at a restaurant where they're kind of balanced in this way. And the whole structure of the book actually in my head, I worked it out to be like a tiered wedding cake. So there's 5 parts to the book. And every single part has the main kind of narrative, which is Constantine's narrative
Mhm.
about how he's experiencing these aftertastes and his journey to become a chef and all of that. And that's kind of told in sequential chronological order. And then sandwiched in between those chapters are interstitial chapters, and every single part has a different narrator for those interstitials. And in my head, I treated those kind of like the frosting or the filling in between the layers of cake. So you have kind of a different flavor. So there's always this balance between what's happening to Constantine and a new voice that comes in and brings a different energy to the story. So when Constantine's story is happy and taking off, there's kind of a different energy to some of the interstitial chapters when he's got kind of more thoughtful discovery, still sitting in some of the early grief of his dad. You've got, for instance, Frankie's chapters where he's giving a food tour that were really upbeat and high energy. So it was very intentionally crafted to balance kind of the darkness and the light.
Yeah, I think that's really well executed because like yeah, like you said, as you're learning about Constantine's background and history, you get these cut twos, like
Mhm.
this really gregarious, excited, funny, like almost like court jestery, like narrator of a like it almost reminds me of like Vince Vaughn in the breakup, like the
It's like
boat
a
tour guide.
spectacle.
Yeah, and he's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
putting on this like huge show. And as you like start to like get wind of like, oh, we're going on this like tour of the chef's culinary experience. And then
Mhm.
as you kind of like start to read further in the book, you kind of understand what that tour is actually doing a little bit more. But you do get this lightness so much out of those scenes.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying like Frankie was one of the most fun characters in this book to write because he just jumps off the page. And
Yeah,
because I was
amazing.
able to write in first person for those interstitial chapters, as opposed to kind of close third, this is like really getting crafty now, but
Yeah, yeah.
as opposed to the close third parts for Constantine, it's just a dynamic shift and you're able to kind of jump into the character even more. So they were really fun and high energy for me to write. And
Yeah,
hopefully
so
they feel that way to
they
read.
yeah, I mean definitely, yeah. Frankie felt like yeah, like he felt like exactly I think what he was intended to feel like in terms of like life of the party, but like also
Mhm.
maybe there's more there that you know, the life of the party isn't always just the life of the party. So
Right.
I love Frankie so much. I want to talk about Mora. She's the other
Yeah.
kind of like the third leg on this stool of main characters, aka Madame Everly. So
Mhm.
she is kind of the first person that Constantine talks to about what he's experiencing and sort of is like kind of the de facto like guide for him throughout the book. Where did she come from? She feels like a very lived in character as well.
Thank you. She came from a lot of my own sort of experiences and beliefs and spirituality. So I genuinely believe that spirits exist, that they're with us, that they're around, and you can bring people that you've lost with you in your life. And she's a character who doesn't necessarily start out that way, but she comes to that experience through her own loss and through someone in her life who's gone, and she has all of these really unhealthy reactions to it. And through some of those unhealthy reactions and those bad behaviors, she comes to this kind of spiritual awakening and the spiritual understanding. And she immediately warns Constantine that what he's doing is a terrible idea because it is. Um, and I think she's a character who throughout the story, she keeps a lot of secrets. It's even hard for me. I'm like trying to think of how to talk about her without revealing too
Yeah,
much.
agreed. Yeah.
Um, but she keeps a lot of secrets throughout the story, and she was really interesting for me to write from a craft perspective because when you read the story the first time and you take her at face value at surface level, she comes off one way. But then when you get to the point in the book, I hope, where she exposes all of these secrets she's been keeping, it turns all of those previous interactions kind of on their head because in every scene, every interaction, she knows things that she's not revealing. She's reacting to what other characters are saying or assuming or thinking about her in a way where she's purposefully not relaying what she knows. And so it was challenging and interesting and kind of a puzzle to figure out how to write that in a way where the story still flows and makes sense. But then when you go back and look at it, you're like, oh, that's what this means. Oh, that's why she said this. Oh, that takes on a double meaning.
Yeah, she's a really interesting character. Yeah, throughout my time reading, I was kind of like trying to figure out like, yeah, where does she actually stand? Like
Hmm.
what is her actual motivation? And it really wasn't until the very end of the book that it sort of kind of becomes like pretty clear as to, what's actually driving her throughout the novel. So I was kind of
Hmm.
back and forth on her at different points. Like, is she like, are we cool with her or is she not? Where do we stand? So I want to talk about like maybe we buried the lead a little bit. We talked about casting a little bit ago. So you've already sold the rights to this book, right? Sony Pictures
Yeah.
now owns the adaptation rights and is hopefully there's a project coming soon. What can you tell us about
Hopefully,
that?
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
That was an amazing experience. So that happened in between the sort of international deals and the US publication deal. Um, Sony read it over a weekend, and the executives there loved it, and we're so excited about this story, and we're so excited to bring it to life. So I'm absolutely thrilled that it's in their hands, and hopefully I will be on board with them to have my hands in it and as much as I can. I know that they're really interested in making sure that the vision of the book gets communicated properly in the world of the film. And so I know some of the discussions have been once we have writers on board and have a script and can figure all of that out, I will be involved in making sure that all of that jives with what the original vision was. But it's been so exciting. It's been a dream to have, first of all, to have them see this book in such a big way because I feel like it is a story that can connect with a lot of people. And I think it's also very cinematic. I think that the way that the story is structured, the way that the scenes show up, it's also just in my head when I was writing it, it's incredibly visual. I know there are some writers who don't visualize as they go, and I can't imagine what that's like. Because for me, it all kind of lives in a very visual way. So it's going to be so exciting to see this brought to life on screen.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's not surprising at all to me. I agree. As I was reading the book, it like every scene felt so easy to see, like up on either, the TV or like on a big screen. I'm happy that movie, I think is the hopefully the intended route here with Sony
Yeah.
Pictures.
Hmm.
Because I do think that feels like the right scope and scale to like tell this story and get all the visuals. I'm also excited because it's a book about the kitchen that, like you said earlier, isn't only about the opening and closing and like
Hmm.
reopening of a restaurant, right? Like I feel like kitchen shows and movies are sort of like predictable in the linear nature that they go in, and this is so much
Hmm.
different than that. And the story that you're telling is so much different than a chef trying to open a five-star, or a five-star, Michelin rated restaurant. There's so much more going on. So congratulations if you
Thank
ever need
you.
any totally unqualified, unsolicited casting advice. Like I said, let me know. I
Lay
got
it on
that.
me. I would love to know. It's hard because I visualize some of these characters in my head, and they're so real to me and they're so personal to me, and I know more than anyone ever needs to know about them. So it's
Yeah.
hard to kind of put an actor into those roles, but it's going to be a very fun
Well,
process.
yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for when that becomes a reality. What do you have going on next? Or is there another project in the pipeline already? Or are you just kind of basking in this one for now?
I'm always writing, so I'm working on another book. It's still very, very early days and in what that's going to be. And I'm a writer who doesn't really work with outlines, so it's like very open-ended at this point. But as far as kind of the setting the scene, it's another speculative fiction book. You can always expect that from me. So set in our reality, but elements of magical realism.
Yeah.
This one takes place in 1899, so the turn of the century, and it spans a very long period of time. And it's about a woman who falls in love with a sailor on an enchanted ship. So it's got elements of like mythology and fairy tale and um, music. So we'll see
Cool.
how all that jives together.
Sounds amazing. Yeah. I feel like the atmosphere is already starting to like pull in on that. That's awesome. I want to be respectful of your time. Your book is 1 day old. I know you've got a ton of press and publicity that you're doing to help get readers interested out there. So we'll end with one last question for you tonight. What's the last great thing that you've read?
It's a great question. So I'm in the middle of Karen Russell's The Antidote, and
Yeah.
I am loving it because she is a genius in all things. And if you like speculative fiction, I think there are few writers out there who are doing it as well or as interestingly as she is. So that's been
Oh,
amazing to check out.
yeah.
I've been waiting for years for that
Nice. Yeah. Love a good prairie witch.
book.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Daria, thank you so much for being with us tonight on Analog Adventures. Readers and listeners and watchers out there, go out and grab your copy of Aftertaste at your local independent bookstore. Um, Schedule it on your next book club calendar, wherever that's going to be. This is definitely a book that you're going to want to talk to people about and share your experience with. And there's also a little like thing on your website, right? You have
Yeah.
a way that people can kind of interact with you on your website.
Yeah. Come reach out to me. It's darialavelle.com if you want me to come visit a book club, come say hi. Happy to do all of that.
Yeah, and then you do have a bonus chapter thing too, right? If
Yes,
you
there's a bonus
someone
chapter you
shares
can check
their
out.
so I guess that should actually be the last question. I can't
Mm.
believe I didn't ask you this before. What would your aftertaste be and who would it be for?
So the thing that would bring me back every time is like very, very, very specific. It's tied to a moment in time. So it is the uh, it's called a chocolate cog. So cog COG as in the
Like,
hardware
uh-huh.
that they used to serve circa 2012 at Le Jules Verne restaurant, which is on the Eiffel Tower. And it's kind of like a chocolate ganache with a mousse, and it's this beautiful, enormous cog the size of a teacup. And that is the dessert that my then boyfriend, now husband, and I shared before he took me out onto the terrace and proposed to me.
Wow,
And then it started to
magical.
pour
Oh
rain.
my
And so we were
goodness.
standing there in the pouring rain in Paris in love and newly engaged. And that would bring me back every
That's
time.
amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Daria. Appreciate your time. Good luck with the rollout of the book. And yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.